Welcome to Hard Talk, and we're broadcasting to you live from the BBC's Radio Theatre in London. I'm Sarah Montague, and I'm here for the BBC's Freedom Season with a man who's thought much about the meaning of freedom. Benjamin Chavis was one of the Wilmington 10 who were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned in the 70s for firebombing a supermarket during racial unrest in North Carolina. Amnesty International called them America's first political prisoners. They were only granted a pardon just over a year ago. Benjamin Chavis has campaigned his whole life for black people to have the same freedoms as white people, working for Martin Luther King when he was just 14, and many years later organising the Million Man March. America is called the land of the free. Does that apply if you are black? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Benjamin Chavis. Benjamin Chavis, does a black child born in America in 2014 have just as many opportunities as a white child?
I believe that a black child being born this year in the United States has more opportunities than ever before, but still not equal opportunities. We still have racial prejudice, racial bias. Racism is still a factor in our society. But I can give you a long-term answer. For the last 50 years, I've seen tremendous progress. The fact that we have an African-American as president of the United States is a testimony to the fulfillment of the dream of Martin Luther King, Jr. But they say freedom is a constant struggle. So you don't take for granted the progress. You keep pushing until there's full equality, until there's full integrated society.
Okay, so there's still a need for the civil rights movement.
Oh, absolutely, there's still a need.
Okay, well, let's take us back to 1971, February, Wilmington in North Carolina. And that was a time where the schools had just ended segregation, but black students there felt that they were getting a raw deal. And you were sent there on the part of your church. You were just a very young man, 23, 24. You were a minister in the church, and you were sent there to do what?
I was 24 years old, and keep in mind, even though I was 24, I was a 12-year veteran of the civil rights movement, having worked with Dr. King when I was a teenager. The United Church of Christ, my denomination, sent me to Wilmington to help with the desegregation process. Integration of schools just didn't happen. In Wilmington, we had to go to federal court. And so Wilmington was on a federal court order to provide an opportunity for black young people and white young people to go to school together. And there was resistance. And that's what started the violence. There was a riot that took place. And even though we were the victims of the riot, we were the targets of the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations firing literally guns at us. 1 year later, in '72, the state of North Carolina indicts us and unjustly charges us, and 10 of us wind up getting sentenced to 282 years in prison. I had the longest sentence, a 34-year sentence.
Okay, but before we get into what happened to you with the court process, those few days, I mean, perhaps we should explain what it was like for a young black guy growing up in the States at that time.
Well, in the early 70s, it's just 3 years since Dr. King's assassination in 1968. Reagan was president. President Reagan was president. And there had been sort of a law and order campaign to suppress the civil rights movement after Dr. King's assassination. So I was one of the young students, militants, I must admit, that was arousing the black consciousness of our community. And my church, the United Church of Christ, sent me to Wilmington to help provide an opportunity for young people to express themselves.
Express themselves how? Because you use the word militant, which suggests that actually you were prepared to go pretty far to get what you wanted.
Well, I was pushing the envelope. Keep in mind, this is the Freedom Series. The basic freedom is the freedom of expression, the right to say no to racism, the right to say no to injustice. And a lot of times in many places, not just in the United States, but all over the world, people's rights to even say no to injustice has been suppressed. And that was the case in Wilmington in 1971.
And now because you had come from, in your own town, I think you were the first black child to have a library card.
Well, I desegregated the library in my hometown. I grew up in Oxford, North Carolina.
And that's because you went in there and asked for a library card?
Well, it wasn't just that simple. I wish it was just that simple, just to ask for things and it'll be given to you. we had to organize protests. And in the case of desegregating the library in my hometown, my parents stood with me. I was so proud that my mother and father would stand with me as I demanded the right to simply read a book or check out a book out of a library. You have to understand, racism is very devastating to any group, to any ethnic group, to any racial group that denies you basic opportunity, denies you basic access to improve your quality of life. Even though I was very young, I understood that something needed to change.
Okay, so you are angry, justifiably, given what you are not allowed to do. But what does that mean that you did in Wilmington? Because you say that you were the victims.
One of the things I learned from Dr. King is how to channel anger into a nonviolent civil rights protest, and that's what we did. I believe in standing up, but you have to stand up in the right way. With freedom also comes responsibility. And so we organized nonviolent protests. We presented a list of demands.
There was a white-owned grocery store which was firebombed that night.
Somebody firebombed it, not the Wilmington 10. And even to this day, no one really knows what really happened to the store. I'm so pleased that...
There were 2 people who died as well. And it was
during the riot. But here's the thing. It took 40 years. The Honorable Governor Perdue, the first female governor of North Carolina, in 2012, we're talking about something, we were sentenced in 1972. So it took 40 years for the governor of North Carolina not just to issue a pardon, but to issue a pardon of innocence, which was very important. I mean, they did their research. They realized that we should not have been arrested. We should not have been in prison. We should not have been prosecuted in the first place. And I'm very thankful that the governor of North Carolina had the courage to issue the Wilmington 10, finally, a pardon of innocence.
But why was it courageous? Because actually, your conviction had been overturned years before, back in, when it was 1980. There were various things that happened. Your sentence was reduced, the testimony was retracted, a federal court overturned the conviction, and yet it was 40 years.
Yes.
And you said it was courageous. Why was that courageous?
The reason why it was courageous is because sometimes it's difficult for people who are in a dominant role in society to confess to racism. That's very difficult. The Honorable Governor Perdue, in issuing the pardon of innocence to the Wilmington 10, said, quote, "This is a case of naked racism." That's very difficult for elected officials, even in 2012, 2013, 2014, to admit, yes.
Even now?
Absolutely.
And given the facts of the case?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's not about the facts, it's about the courage of elected officials to tell the truth to the people.
And it wasn't because, actually, it wasn't so clear-cut, that there were some people who think that, you know, whatever happened then, that you may have had some role in it?
Well, I definitely had a role in mobilizing. I definitely had a role in standing up and speaking out. But we were totally innocent of the false charges of arson. We were totally innocent of the false charges of conspiracy to assault emergency personnel.
Now, you were sentenced to 34 years in prison. You served, I think, about 4 over a 10-year period. You were in
4.5 years in prison, unjustly. But, you know, I just didn't sit in prison.
What was that like? You describe it as dehumanizing, degrading.
Well, I wouldn't encourage anyone to go to prison to strengthen their faith. Prison was difficult. It was hard. It was life-threatening. But I decided to keep my faith in God. I got a master's degree from Duke University while I was in prison. So I decided not to serve time, but to make time serve the cause of the liberation and the freedom movement of our people.
Life-threatening, what do you mean by that? Because there's one report that you actually didn't dare go to the shower rooms for 6 months because
the first 6 months in 1972 when I was in prison, I could not go to the shower because there was a plot to stab me in the shower. So I didn't want to get stabbed with a knife, so I stayed in my cell.
Now, you say as you used the time to get a master's degree in theology, and what?
From Duke University. You know, I was a minister. I wanted to go sharpen my skills. So I think anyone has to decide how you use your time, whether you're in free or in prison or wherever you are. It's how you use your time to make your own self better, to make your community better, and to make the world better.
And you read in doing that, you read in the bathroom at night because you couldn't use lights out. Lights out in the cell meant that you were...
That's correct.
Right. Now, you eventually, when you come out, you continue, I suppose at this stage, the conviction has been overturned, but you haven't been pardoned. It's when you're in your 40s, 1993, that you were elected to lead what is a hugely important organisation, the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. Important to you because you were given membership for your 12th birthday.
Yes.
And it's America's oldest, largest civil rights organisation, 500,000 members. It's a big deal for you.
It's the world's oldest and largest civil rights organization, the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I was so pleased, having joined the NAACP at 12 years old, for 1993 to be elected executive director and CEO. And one of the most proudest moments was inviting Nelson Mandela in 1993 to speak to the NAACP convention in Indianapolis.
Okay, but it didn't go well for you because within a very short time, within your first year, someone threatened to bring a case against you for sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, wrongful dismissal. You arranged a settlement with NAACP funds. You didn't tell the board, and it came out, and they sacked you.
Well, let's go back to the facts. The fact of the matter is, when you are a civil rights leader, when you fight for freedom, people will make false allegations against you. And at the time, there was a former employee of the NAACP who made false allegations. And
so why did you agree to pay her then?
Well, I wanted to reach an out-of-court settlement to protect the organization from these false allegations. And I just want to correct one thing. Some members of the board did know about it. The full board did not know about it. The chairman of the board knew about it, as well as the general counsel.
It does look, do you regret, was it a mistake to use money to try to settle something? You say,
no, that wasn't,
you say the allegations
it wasn't a
true.
mistake to settle, but the mistake was not to inform the full board. That definitely was a mistake.
Because do you think the whole board would have agreed to it?
Absolutely, to defend itself against false allegations.
To spend £300,000 of NAACP money?
Money was not spent, that's incorrect. No, £300,000 was not spent.
Well, one of the reasons it came to light was that you gave her less than that, £64,000, and she said you didn't settle the full term.
£64,000 that I had raised myself personally from my lecture fees, not NAACP money. Just want to correct the record.
Okay, you were sacked. It was a year after you had taken the role. Was that the reason? Was it that perhaps a sense of betrayal that led you then to go from there to accept a senior position in the Nation of Islam?
Well, I wouldn't say it was betrayal. I think there was a dispute, and the board had the right to make the determination that it did. I'm still a life member of the NAACP, still strongly support the NAACP.
You said you felt a victim of a crucifixion at the time.
Well, keep in mind, going back from the Wilmington 10 days, I'm sort of a veteran of people making false allegations. So I know how to withstand that.
Not a feeling a victim?
Well, it's just not about feeling a victim. I think it's important, if you are victimized by any kind of injustice, to have not only the freedom to speak out against it, but to call the facts as they are.
Okay. The facts as they are, you joined the Nation of Islam. You took a senior position in a separatist movement, a controversial separatist movement, calling for its own, that African Americans should have their own nation. Was that a wise thing to do?
Absolutely. First of all, let's get the chronology straight. After the NAACP, I was the national director of the Million Man March, still as a Christian minister. I did not join, that was in 1995. I did not join the Nation of Islam until 1997. I'm very proud of the work I did while I was in the nation. We helped reduce black-on-black crime in many communities. We helped stop some of the self-destruction that was going on in our neighborhoods. That's one of the reasons why I joined, because I wanted to get more hands-on to help and improve the quality of life, particularly of young African-American males. That was the whole purpose of the Million Man March, which, quite frankly, was very successful. It was transformative.
Indeed, sure. But after the Million Man March, you changed your name to Benjamin Chavis Mohammed. You had this senior leadership position, and at the time there were criticisms of the Nation of Islam that it was, I mean, they still exist, but at that time that they were anti-Semitic, that they were anti-white, that they were prejudiced against gays. Is that how you came to see them?
No, absolutely. Even though I worked very closely with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and I did have a senior position in the Nation of Islam, at no time did I ever witness or hear any anti-Semitism. I think on one occasion, there was one person formerly connected with the Nation of Islam that made some anti-Semitic remarks, and I denounced that person for doing it.
Because you'll know that there is plenty of clips of Louis Farrakhan referring to the Jews as satanic.
Well, let me just say this. The work that I did in the nation, I'm very proud of, because we helped save lives, we helped transform lives. The Million Man March, I don't back up for that. It was something, next year will be the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March, and I think there'll be a moment that people will celebrate. It was the largest gathering, it was the largest First Amendment gathering in American history on October 16, 1995.
Sure.
I'm very proud of that.
Understood. But it's your association with the Nation of Islam, which your former colleagues...
I associate with a lot of people, and I don't back up from my associations. I associated with Martin Luther King. I associated with Nelson Mandela.
But you fell out with them too. Why did you fall out with the Nation of Islam?
I didn't fall out. I just went back to the church, which was my home. I'm a minister in the United Church of Christ, very proud of that.
Why was that? They didn't get rid of you, the Nation of Islam?
Well, it's not about getting rid, it's about evolving. My life is evolving. We're celebrating Freedom 2014.
So you left them on good terms?
Absolutely, left on good terms.
Okay, and you returned to your own church, who had...
On good terms.
Who had decided to terminate your ministry.
Well, they got upset because they didn't feel that a Christian minister should try to be a Muslim minister. That's their right. But I believe...
Can you see why they might think that?
Well, you know, it's a little contradictory to say that with God all things are possible, and then when you try to do all things that are possible, people criticize you. So I'm very proud of my evolution, and I think that you learn as you go in life, and I think the world in which we live in today is a much better place because people sacrifice, because people stand up, and because people speak out.
So no mistakes there with the Nation of Islam?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, let's get on, because you said at the outset that huge progress has been made.
Absolutely.
But there is still a lot. A black child born today does not have the same opportunities as a white child. And when you look, I mean, the stats are staggering, because we started off talking back in the 70s, and 67 black households earned basically a half of what white households did. And that figure has hardly changed. It's 59% now. Home ownership rates hardly changed in that time. Black unemployment rate still double that of whites as it was in the 50s. Why have those figures, the economic possibilities, not changed for black people?
Well, you know, there's a problem of income inequality. There's a problem of institutionalization of economic injustice. You know, and it takes time. You do not solve a problem, a social problem, a racial problem, a societal problem in 2 or 3 decades. It takes a long time.
But we're talking 60 years here, and they're hardly shifting these figures. In fact, the prison figures have got worse.
There's a serious mass incarceration. There's a serious contradiction about the disproportionate impact that the criminal justice system in the United States has had on black people, no question about it. So I want to make sure that you understand what I'm saying. The figures that you cite are accurate, and those figures expose that the problem of racial injustice is very deep-seated in the United States of America. And even though we have an African American as president, as I said, that doesn't mean that we still do not have problems. But the fact that we have a black person in the White House is itself a very serious step forward to at least not only shedding light on these problems, these contradictions. See, some people would say that glass is half empty. I don't. I see it as half full. I think all the progress that we've made is worth continuing to keep pushing.
Okay, but some people, as you'll know, say that that man in the White House, President Obama, hasn't done what he should have done. That, in fact, he has
disagree.
Fewer African-American cabinet members than George W. Bush does. And less than half the number Bill Clinton had.
All right, let me let you finish. I believe that President Barack Obama is one of the best presidents that the United States has ever had. He's in his 5th term. Just yesterday, over 7 million people signed up for Obamacare, getting health care for the first time. Here in London, you have health care. We don't have that in the United States. So it takes time. And when President Obama was elected, the economy was wrecked. George Bush, who may have had some brothers and sisters in the White House, wrecked the economy. Barack Obama has rebuilt the economy slowly. And he had 2 wars that we should never have been in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now he's ending those wars.
Okay, but your old organization, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, says of him that since he took office, white people in this country are doing a bit better, black people are doing a full point worse.
The responsibility of the NAACP is to call it where it is, and those
that's
statistics,
the way it is?
That's the way it is, that the income gap for blacks and whites has widened.
since President Obama came to office?
No, it was widening before he came in.
That's what they're saying.
No, I think that's not accurate. What has happened
I'm reading
is,
a quote from them.
well,
Benjamin Jealous, the CEO, a year ago, since President Obama first took office.
I believe that the gap between blacks and white in the United States is too wide. And the question is, how can it be bridged? I believe that President Obama is doing a good job. I think that they've just had a report that the housing stats, all the foreclosure rates, blacks had the highest foreclosure rates, which started before Obama became president, but now it's coming down just a little bit. Black unemployment is still one of the highest, but it's coming down a little bit. So all these things you have to calibrate. And I think taking a broad stroke analysis of whether or not Obama's a good president or not, it's sort of unfair.
Okay, but perhaps it comes down to what, your whole life you've taken part in people movements. You talked about the Million Man March.
If you compare Barack Obama to President Bush, hands down, he's a better president. Hands down.
The American philosopher and academic Cornel West said, we've got a black leadership that's deferential to Obama, that's subservient to Obama. You keep folks so scared, you keep folks so intimidated. You give them money, access, but they're still scared. And as long as they're scared, you're on the plantation.
I know Dr. Cornel West. He's a close friend of mine. We're colleagues. And certainly he's one of the great intellectual giants of our society. And his criticisms has some validity. But my point is that we tend to be overly critical. We tend not to see the progress that has been made. And particularly for the young people that are coming up today, my job is to keep them encouraged, not to discourage. This is not a hopeless situation. Progress has been made. Do we need more progress? Absolutely. Have we reached full equality? No. Are we headed there? Yes, but we're not there yet.
And is it in the hands of politicians or the people? Should it be viable?
It's always in the hands of the people. If it was in the hands of politicians, we all would be in trouble.
So this militant, do you still feel militant?
Well, it depends on what you mean by militant.
Well, I'm wondering, you used the word at the outset.
I am still a seasoned militant freedom fighter today. But I fight for freedom in ways that can really help change the quality of life of people, not just for black people, but for all people. Just wanted to make sure that you understand that I'm here on this program not only to fight for the rights of black people, but for the rights of all people. Because what you find out, you just can't stand up for freedom for yourself. You have to stand up for freedom for all people. Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, people all over the world. And that is why I've also worked in Africa and other parts to make sure that people's quality of life is improved. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
And so you would still be asking people to what? Rise up at injustice?
Absolutely. Keep marching. Keep standing up. Keep speaking out. In fact, in 2014, we have more reason to have a worldwide freedom movement than we did 50 years ago.
Because?
Because of the contradictions, because of the injustices. People need to speak out. I think sometimes we become too tolerant of injustice, like environmental injustice. This is a major thing, where a lot of people are disproportionately exposed to environmental hazards. I was very much involved in helping to build the worldwide environmental justice movement. It's one of the issues that I'm working on now.
Well, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you very much for coming on Hard Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Chavis.